There are folks out there who don't have any idea what on earth TARAMYN is doing in the misty background during this scene. Allow me to explain. This is a nod to the planet Griswold, where TARAMYN'S ancestors played the role of cloud callers. In the mist, he's performing the Sigh of the Shrouded Sun. It's a pre-Republic spiritual exercise where you hold your arm out to act as a soul conduit for the morning dew. The idea is that on Aldhani, where the sacred and the geological are so intertwined, TARAMYN is trying to braid his spirit into the fog so the Empire's sensors can't distinguish his heartbeat from a weather pattern. It's a form of metaphysical camouflage, and I'm messing with you. He's just extending the aerial of the battle radio they used during the heist. Centered in the frame, we find the real subjects of the scene, Cassian and Nemik, both wearing faces that suggest they're cold, hungry, fed up, and expecting to expire today. Nemik is carrying his manifesto around like a talisman, trying to use syntax and theory to keep his hands from shaking after a sleepless night. He's the marine biology student who has memorized the anatomy of a shark but has never actually felt the water turn cold. He's struggling to understand why his faith doesn't calm him. It's a beautifully human moment of cognitive dissonance. He believes in the cause, but his central nervous system hasn't read the pamphlet. He's trying to recategorize Cassian as a functional asset. Cassian sleeps like a stone because he's a man who's already survived the end of his world. Anxiety is for people who still believe they have something left to lose, and he knows that staying awake won't make the morning any less lethal. He treats his own body like a piece of stolen tech. You charge it when you can, you use it until it breaks, and you don't waste battery power on faith in the middle of the night. To Nemik, Cassian is merely a high-end wrench used to loosen a specific imperial bolt. It's a clean, clinical way to emotionally distance himself from a man who is only here for the cash. Nemik argues that because the Empire has no moral boundaries, the rebellion should take hold of every chance. It's a dangerous bit of intellectual gymnastics. He's advocating for a total war of the spirit where the insurgency becomes as cold as the machine it's trying to break. He wants to beat the monster by building a better monster, forgetting that once you start treating people as functional assets, you've already let the Empire win the philosophical argument. When Nemik suggests that the Empire might think differently tomorrow after the heist, Cassian delivers a chilling thesis statement. They don't care enough to learn. You mean nothing to them. Nemik wants the Empire to be a villain that can be taught a lesson, a monster that at least has the decency to acknowledge that it has a challenger. Cassian knows the truth. The Empire is an indifferent weather system. You don't teach a hurricane. To the Empire, the rebellion is merely a clerical error to be deleted. The mist acts as a physical manifestation of Nemik's unsettled mind, a blurring of the lines where his academic certainty meets the sharp, jagged rocks of the mission. Quite lucky then that I think it's probably real mist, and probably more than they bargained for, as I don't think they meant us to be confused by TARAMYN'S Tai Chi. The scene reaches its boiling point when Nemik, cluelessly high on his own rhetoric, sarcastically suggests that perhaps Cassian should be thankful for the crumbs of freedom. When Cassian bends over and asks, "Do I look thankful to you?" the functional asset stops being a tool and starts being a mirror. Cassian stares back with the gaze of someone who's lost a planet, a father, and his own freedom to the Imperial machine, a sequence of soul-crushing realities that I believe Nemik, who I think has been reasonably sheltered in life, has only read about in books. Nemik backs down, and it's the retreat of a man realizing that mercenary or not, Cassian is real in his dislike of the Empire. After the friction of the Kyber revelation, he'd used that to distance himself from the mercenary, but as Cassian leans in and Nemik gets a good look in his eyes, the sarcasm evaporates. Nemik recognizes the weight of a lifetime spent under the boot, moments after recategorizing Cassian as functional to get over the hurt of the previous day's hike. He U-turns and welcomes him as a man once again. When Cassian tells him he'll sleep when it's done, he's treating Nemik's frayed nerves like a piece of overtaxed hardware, promising him that once the heist provides the surge, the eventual crash will be absolute. It's a survivalist's mercy, a way to quiet the kid's mind long enough to make him useful. But in the grammar of tragedy, sleep is a loaded word. And done isn't great either. While Cassian is just trying to get a malfunctioning asset through the next 6 hours, there's a cold structural shadow over the promise, and some patrons pointed out that it echoes back to the moment where the bartender tells Cassian that he'll pay at the end. As they prepare for the day, the divide between Nemik's academic hope and Cassian's lived trauma remains bridgeable only by the job at hand. The heist is here. The manifesto is written. The aerial extended. Now all that's left is to find out if nothing can actually break a machine that refuses to acknowledge it. One of the things Andor does over and over again is show the Empire talking about eradication in the tone of a boring meeting. It's everywhere, and as such seems like one of the most important themes Gilroy wants us to understand. This is a clear nod to how corporations and authoritarian machines work. It's how systems operated by people allow those people to oppress without being broken by guilt or sympathy. As we've already seen, the Empire's truest master of the art is the ISB. This is just another flavor of the same administrative whitewashing. No one slams a fist on a table and declares their evil plan. It's just a senior officer giving a polished and quite smug little briefing to a visiting colonel, explaining how an indigenous culture has been steadily broken apart and redirected until its sacred ritual can be replaced by an imperial event strategy. It is competent administration that echoes old-school British colonialism. Beehaz opens by defining the Darnies in a way the Empire always defines the people it intends to dominate, as fundamentally lesser, fundamentally legible, fundamentally manageable. They're a simple people. There it is. Once you have reduced a people to a type, once you have decided they can be summed up by a handful of convenient defects, every policy that follows can be dressed up as practicality. You are no longer dealing with human beings in all their complexity, you're dealing with a problem population, a set of tendencies, a thing to be steered, like vermin. And the Commandant has the full steering manual ready. He talks about their difficulty holding multiple ideas simultaneously. He talks about their pride. He talks about giving them options so they get distracted by choosing between alternatives and fail to notice the thing they actually wanted has been taken off the table entirely. Imperial power works by managing perception. It works by arranging the field of choice. It works by making dispossession feel like participation. It has echoes of how Luthen works, offering the illusion of choice and guaranteeing the result is always what most benefits him. That line about alternatives captures a whole logic of modern control. You don't always have to ban a ritual outright if you can surround it with enough convenience, friction, fatigue, and substitution that the ritual slowly withers on its own. They have not marched in and simply said your sacred pilgrimage ends today. They have done something much colder and more intelligent. They have offered transport knowing the Darnies will refuse. They have placed comfort units along the way, shelters, taverns, cheap local drink, little concessions, little corruptions, little engineered temptations and fatigue points that wear the ritual down from within. 500 becomes 60, and the Empire gets to stand back and pretend history has simply moved on. That is what makes this scene so poisonous. Beehaz is describing cultural destruction as if he were explaining a successful customer retention strategy, and the show is so good at this kind of ugliness because Beehaz does not think of himself as a butcher. He thinks of himself as informed, experienced, realistic, the seasoned colonial operator who understands the natives better than they understand themselves. There is vanity in every line he delivers. His smugness with himself is off the charts, the kind of smug where you think you're so safe that you redirect soldiers to sofa duty and continue to put your trust in a man you stole everything from. While Beehaz is talking, the scene cuts away to the pilgrims. It refuses to let his language have the final word. He is turning the Darnies into a case study, a behavior pattern, an object of expert commentary. The cuts to the pilgrims restore their reality. They're not a theory. There are people still making the climb, still carrying something sacred in their bodies, still persisting, even reduced, even thinned out, even pressured from every side. Those cutaways puncture the authority of imperial narration. Beehaz sounds in command, but the camera tells us he's describing a living thing he has never really understood. The numbers do their own work too. Not that long ago they'd put 15,000 out there. Then Gorn reports, we counted 60 last night. That drop is appalling. It tells the whole history of occupation in one exchange. A mass act of communal belonging has been reduced to a remnant. A people who once filled the valley now arrive in scraps. The ancient ritual has been strategically starved. Then comes the ugliest line in the scene. The visiting Colonel Pettigar asks if this is their sacred valley, and Beehaz answers with perfect imperial cynicism. Ultimately they will return, won't they, Colonel, when you need plenty of arms and legs to build all you've got planned. That is the moment where everything slides fully into focus. The Darnies are allowed to disappear as a people with history, memory, land and ritual, only to reappear later as labour, arms and legs, bodies for construction, inputs for development. The sacred valley is first emptied of meaning and then filled with project scope. That line tells you exactly what Pettigar is doing here and exactly why Beehaz is trying to impress him. Petagar may not be the local face of occupation in the same way Beehaz is, but he is clearly the highest status arrival, the man connected to what comes next. He is the future in bureaucratic form, the engineer, the builder, the representative of the phase after suppression, which is redevelopment. So of course Beehaz is performing for him. He's giving the glossy presentation, he's showing off his command of the local terrain, social and cultural as much as military. He wants to look useful to the machinery above him. And yes, those calf cups are funny, or they would be if the scene around them was not so vile. They look like office coffee cups, reusable but modelled after the disposable kind, perfect little props for what the Empire really is in Andor, not just a frighteningly realistic corpo-fascist state, but a normal workplace, a system maintained by meetings, chatter, site visits, process reviews, middle managers, little rituals of hospitality, banality. These men are talking about dismantling a culture with the visual language of colleagues on a walk-around. Gorn's silence through all this is where the scene gets its real dramatic charge. He already knows too much. He has crossed the line that Empire cannot afford its servants to cross. He has actually seen the occupied people. Once that happens, every briefing becomes unbearable, every euphemism curdles, every tidy phrase reveals its violence. He's unable to hear their words as anything but obscenities. So when Petagar asks, will the Darnies let us build our new facility in peace, Gorn answers, I don't see them having a choice. It is simultaneously obedient and damning. On paper it sounds like the expected military assurance, but underneath it's carrying daggers the others don't notice. Then Commandant Beehaz and Lieutenant Gorn move outside, and the environment tells the next part of the story before anyone even speaks. The Sacred Valley has already been translated into damp concrete, stains, cables, utility boxes, blank walls, and military drabness. It is the ugliness of somewhere repurposed by people who do not love it. Beehaz asks, are we secure? And Gorn says he has brought in sentries from Kimzi, his cover for the arrival of Clem and company, and sent the best men to the perimeters. Clever, get the most competent operatives a couple of miles out of the way. At the end, when Beehaz lets Gorn know it has to be perfect or else, it feels like the second scene in a row where someone has said something ominous to close it out. Cassian's claim that Nemik will sleep when he's done was full of unintended menace, but claiming, in fiction, that something needs to be absolutely perfect? Oh dear, that's never going to end well. Imperial evil is presented here as procedure, as expertise, as planning, as a chain of men discussing logistics, labour and spectacle, while the last fragments of a sacred culture are pared down to something manageable. Beehaz praises the eye as quite the celestial spectacle, and that line is a perfect summary of the Imperial attitude. They can appreciate the beauty, they can market the beauty, they can package that beauty into a viewing festival down in the Enterprise Zone and monetize it. What they cannot tolerate is the idea that the beauty belongs to someone else, or more specifically, that it doesn't or shouldn't belong to anyone, that it carries memory, ritual, inheritance, obligation. Empire is always happy to keep the scenery if it can kill the meaning. Scenes like this make it clear what kind of system that payroll in the vault sustains. It is the bloodstream of a regime that studies how to break people without appearing to break them, how to turn sacred land into a development zone, how to convert living culture into labor supply. Once you hear Beehaz talk, the mission stops feeling merely strategic and starts feeling cleansing, necessary, an interruption in the smooth confidence of men who think history is theirs to administer. So the real power of the scene lies in that contrast between surfaces and truths. On the surface, it's a routine inspection, a little local briefing, a few comments on the natives, some dry follow-up outside. Underneath, it's the whole anatomy of colonial rule. Contempt posing as knowledge, dispossession posing as choice, redevelopment poised to finish what military occupation began. And in the middle of it all stands Gorn, silent, controlled, already turned against them, carrying the unbearable knowledge that the machine sounds most monstrous when it is convinced it is merely being sensible. Evil is often organized, it is often articulate, it often has a nice cup in its hand and a project timeline in its head. And when it speaks most calmly, it is already measuring how much of a people can be destroyed while keeping their bodies for hard labor.
Everybody in this Andor scene is being forced into a role that half fits and half violates who they really are. Cassian becomes a soldier, TARAMYN becomes a stormtrooper again, Gorn becomes the calm Imperial officer one last time, Vel and Cinta become shadows hiding in the dark, and the Darnies continue the pilgrimage while passing through an armed corridor of occupation that insists it's normal. The governing idea is that rebellion at this stage does not yet look like open resistance. It looks like concealment, impersonation, code, discipline, silence. But the counter-idea is everywhere too. Identity resists erasure. TARAMYN cannot stop sounding like an authoritarian. Cassian cannot stop sounding like an outsider. The Darnies cannot help but curse the uniforms of armed men as they pass. Gorn's responses to his superiors betray a surprising amount of truth. This is a scene where everyone is pretending, and the power of it lies in how much truth leaks through anyway. Coincidentally, that is the same theme as Club Silencio from Mulholland Drive, which I've recently done an analysis on. The first movement of the scene establishes that to strike a system this large, you first have to disappear inside the machinery of its assumptions. This has echoes of what Cassian already said to Luthen in that foundry hall about the Empire being too lazy and easy to steal from. This is an insurgency at work, coded, technical, calm, procedural. The rebels are building their own invisible network across the valley, using discipline and timing to create a second reality under the official one. The battle radio exchange is the sound of a parallel order coming alive under the Empire's nose. Nemik explains that once it locks in, it will carry on working long after everything else is fried. That line is practical on the surface, but thematically it says this is what rebellion needs to be in Andor: resilient, adaptable, able to outlast the system's ordinary channels. No disguise is complete. People carry their history into the role, and that history keeps surfacing. Cassian puts this plainly without meaning to in his light suspicion of the radio. He says it looks Imperial. Much of the rebellion in Andor is made from stolen Imperial form, repurposed for the opposite end. But the line also speaks to the deeper discomfort of the whole scene. The rebellion is borrowing the enemy's tools, uniforms, language, and choreography. That's necessary, but it is also contaminating. TARAMYN becomes the strongest embodiment of this tension. Once we learn that he was a stormtrooper, the whole scene reorders itself. His command style, his bossiness, his history reactivating under pressure. The rebellion needs his training, but the training comes from the very institution they're fighting. TARAMYN tells Cassian he is a soldier now, forcing him into something more complete. Not act like a soldier, you are a soldier now. In the immediate context, he means performance. On the level of the episode, it's a prophecy. Cassian is being told what he will become before he is ready to accept it. For what it's worth, I will come back to this one day, but I do not believe Cassian truly becomes a soldier until the prison arc. TARAMYN's past is explicit now. He was once formed by the Empire at the level of muscle memory, command structure, and battlefield identity. He has lived inside the machine's most iconic uniformed expression. He hopes that the discipline and order he learned under the Empire can be morally purified by placing them in the service of rebellion. That is not entirely false, and he is useful precisely because of what he was, but the scene shows us how inescapably the past still shapes him. Cassian says he likes giving orders, doesn't he? And Skeen says, makes sense, right? He's been built by command hierarchy. Under stress, that old form returns. That makes him more than merely useful, it makes him tragic. The rebellion needs him at his most Empire-shaped for this to work. Skeen makes a comment about how Cinta reacted when she found out. We discover stormtroopers killed her family. I don't think we ever learn TARAMYN's origin story, but I wonder if it's the same. Not that anything happened to his family, but that he had to be involved in carrying out such orders and noped out as a result. Skeen's function in this scene is subtle, but as always, sharp. He is always prodding at fault lines. He weaponizes knowledge socially. He turns hidden histories into present facts. He is the scene's reminder that revolutionary coalitions are morally unstable assemblages held together by necessity rather than natural trust. We cut to the women of the team and finally see what they've been up to. They're hunkered down on the other side of the base, the dam side, on the other side of the reservoir. Vel's line, "It might be best if we split these up between us and," is cut off by the arrival of the soldiers. She is trying to maintain operational control, but the real shape of the occupation intrudes physically, crudely and unpredictably. Her authority in this scene is defined by compression. She has to think, plan and stay still under pressure. They sink into the shadows. Cinta, meanwhile, seems to become contained intensity. She is trapped in the proximity of imperial banality. For someone with her history, that would be its own violence. Their hiding place is an ancient, rudimentary structure that provides shelter from the Aldhani wind. You'd have to assume any structure the Dani's built in this valley has something to do with the eye and once carried some meaning. That's important once the soldiers arrive to piss beside it. It's one of the ugliest little acts in the episode because it is casual desecration, the ordinary body language of occupation. The soldiers treat the landscape as theirs to use without thought. Their crude conversation sounds like sexual gossip, probably about a man caught between two women or some kind of sordid barrack story. You just know these guys draw a lot of willies on the back of toilet stall doors back at the base. The eye roll moment from Vel and Cinta humanizes them under extreme tension. They're in mortal danger, yet the soldiers' idiotic conversation is still recognizable as idiotic. Immature little boys without a grasp on class or shame. That tiny flash of shared exasperation says, even now, even here, while we're scared of them, these men are still pathetic. Atop the dam, Gorn's line to Petagar is one of the best in the scene. Well, the Danis don't believe it ever ends, so yes sir, it has definitely started. It is elegant, double-edged, and culturally attentive in a way Imperial speech usually isn't. Gorn is still performing Imperial professionalism, but he cannot stop himself phrasing reality through the Dani's belief rather than Imperial certainty. Nobody's noticed except us, but he is already speaking from a threshold position throughout this episode. He's in uniform, but his language has shifted. Checking in with Cassian / Clem, we find our squad facing each other across the path, creating a controlled corridor. Then the Danis emerge and walk through it. The sacred pilgrimage now passes through an Imperial checkpoint. Ritual is still happening, but only under armed supervision. The first visible burning crystal streaking through the sky means the celestial event is no longer future anticipation but active presence. It means time is narrowing. It also links the rebels' movement to something much older and larger than their plan. When TARAMYN finally screams for his squad to march, the action begins. The momentum of the heist starts to build. It formalizes their theft of authority and represents the biggest threshold moment they've had yet. The rebels are now using Imperial command language to append themselves to the back of a sacred people's procession. Everybody is in costume, but nobody is fully concealed. The Empire believes it has organized this valley into visibility and order. The rebels are betting that invisibility can be manufactured inside that order, and the deeper truth running between both groups is that the land itself still belongs most fully to the people who remember what it means. The scene takes the machinery of a heist and fills it with history, grief, disguise, and desecration. It is thrilling on a technical level. The radios lock, the teams move, the timings align.
But what gives it real dramatic force is the human instability underneath. TARAMYN is commanding from old Imperial muscle memory. Cassian is being told to inhabit a role he does not yet believe in. Vel and Cinta are hiding inside ancient stone while soldiers laugh and desecrate the landscape outside. Gorn is still speaking the language of the Empire, but with meanings it can no longer fully hide. And through all of this, the Danis, reduced but not erased, keep walking. The previous sequence from Andor Episode 6, The Eye, was all about the strain of disguise. The rebels put on Imperial uniforms, took up Imperial radios, and borrowed Imperial language, but it kept reminding us that costume can only do so much. This is the thematic pressure this scene inherits and deepens, because now the same thing is happening everywhere. Everybody is in role, everybody is performing, and everywhere the truth underneath keeps showing through.
It opens in Beehaz's quarters, and the first thing it does is show us Empire as household theatre. The great Commandant Beehaz is fussing over a sash. His son is being dressed, his wife is helping, or rather being conscripted into helping, and the whole mood is already sour. The Empire is forever trying to present itself as composed, orderly, ceremonially intact. It wants the evening to look correct. The Commandant must look correct. The family must look correct. Even the child must be turned into part of the display. So when Beehaz complains that the sash was not stored properly, that it has all been compressed, Roboda answers, "Perhaps you've expanded." It's such a merciless line because it punctures the whole performance in one go. He wants a problem with the object and his theory is ludicrous. She points to the man. It reminded me of Robert Baratheon sending a terrified squire running for his breastplate stretcher. The scene tells you exactly what kind of authority he is. He's clearly an abuser. The poisonous look he gives her is the reaction of somebody whose image of himself has been challenged in a room where he expects automatic deference. Straight away, the domestic space starts echoing the previous scene's larger pattern. Beehaz is dressed like command, but the reality showing through is vanity, brittleness, and a marriage full of contempt. Then Leonard refuses the blouse. I'm not wearing that. I think it's freaking hilarious that they went with the word blouse. I'm not sure there's a single better chosen word in the entire show. I expect he's also wearing garters. It brings to mind Ron Weasley's dress robes. I wouldn't want to wear it either, but the emotional logic is much nastier than that. He is being costumed into Imperial continuity. Beehaz wants the son properly dressed inside the family image of authority. Leonard is being asked to perform rank by inheritance, so when he says, "Mother, I don't feel well," and Roboda says he might have a fever, Beehaz cuts straight through both of them. You'll make an effort tonight if it kills you. Feeling is irrelevant, truth is irrelevant, your body itself is secondary if the schedule requires display. Leonard may or may not be actually ill, he reads more as a spoiled, sulking child than a genuinely sick one, but I don't read Roboda as lying about the fever either. Maybe the boy knows the old head on the radiator trick. But it doesn't matter, the father does not care either way. The child is not being treated as a child, he's being treated as part of the evening's presentation. When Beehaz says he wants everyone on their best behaviour, she answers, "I look forward to seeing that." It's such a dry, lethal line. She is not having an argument with him in the usual sense, but she is exposing him. He wants to stage an evening of imperial dignity, and she keeps reminding us that the man at the centre of that dignity is vulgar, threatening and small. Beehaz is in full costume, and reality is already leaking through all over him. Then the scene moves back out to the hill. The disguised rebels are still in role, still folded into the machinery of imperial order, but the truth underneath keeps pressing at the edges. Gorn halts the company. TARAMYN halts the squad. One of the real Imperial squaddies glances over with a half-formed suspicion, not enough to identify the danger, just enough to register that something's a bit off. He glances at one of his squad mates but doesn't speak up. I think that's a really realistic moment. Think of it like this. We're all warned not to let people tailgate through our office doors, but we all do it. In retrospect, that weird guy that followed you in earlier was obviously up to no good, but what did you do about it? How many of us actually confront him or raise the alarm in that moment that it matters? We think, nah, probably fine, and then it usually turns out it was fine. This guy's thinking, well, no one else has noticed, what am I meant to do? Speak up and tell Gorn these guys are fake Alkenzi guys? What if I sound crazy? Probably nothing, they're just hungover or something. Then Gorn speaks to the Dani leader in their own language. You look well for such a long journey. The leader answers, may the eye stay open long enough to find some good within you. There's a positive way to read that and a nasty one. I think it's the latter. I think the unspoken part is, and the eye will never be open that long. Which is even harsher once you remember goat herder Walter White here doesn't believe the thing ever closes. We've no idea if he knows of Gorn and the Dani woman, I suspect so, but the line works either way. Vel and Cinta are now in full underwater gear moving into the next phase of the plan. Outwardly, they are the most functionally prepared people in the sequence. They have equipment, route, timing and task. Their pure action being propelled under the water, climbing the ladder, sprinting around on top of the dam giving me N64 GoldenEye flashbacks. But then when the moment actually comes, when Cinta says call them and Vel has to be the one who commits the operation to its next irreversible step, the reality underneath shows itself. She hesitates. She is the leader, yes. She is also the person whose body now has to obey the plan. All of the operational calm in the world does not erase the fact that she is about to fling herself down the side of a dam in the middle of a heist. Meanwhile, Nemik gets a nice little payoff to the earlier Dawn conversation with Cassian. You were right, I'm not tired at all. It captures the moment anxiety flips into adrenaline. In the previous scene, Nemik could not sleep because belief was not calming him. Now the eye is beginning overhead, the heist is in motion and his body is crossed into exhilaration. But even here, his real self still leaks through the role. He cannot help saying it, he cannot help gawking like a child and speaking from awe and feeling. TARAMYN instantly snaps back, tighten up. In other words, stop being yourself out loud, stay inside the part. Gorn assigns the squads their tasks, singling out 3 to escort the officers back to the base. The other squads won't even consider this suspicious because squad 3 are the unlucky ones. They have to go back and work. 1, 2 and 4 get to watch the eye, share a flask or 2 and maybe even meet a local woman, because that's going to go great. Before we get there though, the scene gives us Beehaz again, making a joke about how thoroughly he has converted someone else's sacred exchange into his own bureaucratic categories. A lease, a smell, a skin. He can only process what is happening by flattening it. He wants the entire evening reduced to terms he recognizes: transaction, inconvenience, performance, and reward. He talks about a sacred exchange the way someone talks about sitting through a dull presentation before drinks. That flattening effect is the point. He has turned a people's ritual into one more irritating obligation in his evening schedule. Above the stench is not just racism or colonial contempt, it's class disgust. He wants separation from bodies, labor, smell, and proximity. He wants refinement on one level and everyone else kept lower down. At the same time, the heist is showing us another side of the same truth. Imperial order looks solid from the outside and is full of human blind spots within. The Kimzi beat on the dam is part of that. Some small procedural thing has gone wrong. The squad cheesing it across the dam were waiting for a call they should not have needed. Kimzi is annoyed because they are relying on instruction when they should already know the drill. I took too long thinking about these guys and what the show wanted us to take from this moment, and then I realized it doesn't. They're not the focus here. That moment is there to show us Kimzi as a risk. He's conscientious, he's serious about his work, he's a hall monitor. In a base full of people who can't show initiative or speak up when they sense something's wrong, Kimzi sticks out as a risk factor. He's got a little bit of Cyril's zeal and his belief that things need to be done right. If he's more competent than Cyril, he could be dangerous. That's why Vel slipping past Kimzi feels wildly precarious. He could have turned his head. He didn't. The machine could have noticed the truth outside its field of vision. It didn't. The Empire fills the valley with structures, uniforms, rules, sentries, schedules, and comms, and still it remains vulnerable to the fact that people cannot see everything at once. I can't shake the fact, to be honest, that this is another hole in the plan. Kimzi was at his station where Gorn told him to be, and Vel and Cinta were just supposed to run along the top and hope? Back in the valley, even Beehaz himself seems to sense there's something odd about the new squad, but he doesn't listen to the little itch telling him something doesn't add up. He's thinking about dinner and all the things he'll say to impress Petagar. The Dani leader says tell him our ghosts have strong hands and long memories. It takes everything Beehaz has been trying to do to this culture and sweeps it aside in one stroke. He thinks he is attending a bit of ceremonial nonsense. The leader is telling him that the past is not gone, that memory is not passive, that the dead are not decorative and history is not over. The land remembers, the people remember, the injury remembers, the tree remembers. And Gorn translates it as, may the eye find the good in all of us. Gorn is still acting as Imperial translator, but he is no longer faithfully serving Imperial understanding. He softens the line, domesticates it, finds Beehaz something that will keep the ceremony moving and the Commandant complacent. And all the while, Vel is still there on the top of the dam, still struggling through that final moment of commitment. Cinta says, Vel. TARAMYN calls over the radio. Vel finally steadies herself and says, go, we go. Finally, after all the prep, all the build-up, the heist is on. The previous scene showed us disguise under strain. This one shows an entire evening built on disguise, from the rebel uniforms to the family finery, to the ritual politeness, to Gorn's translations, to Beehaz's assumption that his authority is real because it is being ceremonially acknowledged. But at every level the truth keeps showing through, a bully inside the SASH, a warning inside the blessing, a traitor inside the officer, panic inside the leader, memory inside the ceremony, a heist inside the machinery.
This scene feels like the last few seconds before a photograph is taken, when everyone is still trying to hold the pose. Beehaz wants the family arranged correctly, the officers want the ritual completed correctly, even the rebels for a little longer have to stay inside the pose. But underneath all of that choreography, the next reality has already started. The heist is no longer a plan, it's happening. And the Empire? They're still arranging the photograph while a different reality is already happening just outside of the frame. The moment those doors slide closed behind Commandant Beehaz during the Aldhani heist in Andor, the whole episode changes gear, and before long it does so again with devastating results because of one single Imperial technician who cares about doing his job right.
Once the Commandant steps inside, still talking smugly about how Dani culture is basically finished, history stops listening and smashes him in the face. He's still mid-sentence, still describing a conquered people as though they are already museum material. And then TARAMYN barks, drop it, on the floor. That is the sound of one order replacing another, one reality replacing another. The evening the Empire thought it was hosting has just been taken away from it. The heist scene understands that power and control are related, but they're not the same thing. The Empire has the base, the uniforms, the codes, the payroll, the guns, the hierarchy. The rebels have timing, nerve, an inside man, a very small window, and a willingness to force everyone in their path into a crisis. Andor has spent the whole Aldhani arc showing us where empires are weaker than they look. They rely on people standing where they are told, hearing the right voice, the right tone of voice, assuming the system is still itself. Once that choreography gets interrupted, all the human mess underneath comes pouring out. Most of the heist is about taking Imperial systems and making them behave against Imperial interests. The uniforms, the radio, the walk, the stormtrooper, we've covered all those. Now Beehaz's body becomes a key. The guards by the vault are handled through military reflex and turned into forced labor. Even the eye itself becomes part of the operation, swallowing attention and noise under something bigger and older than the Empire can really understand. TARAMYN moves like a man who knows the value of the first 3 seconds in a room because he used to belong to the machine he's now cutting to pieces. Skeen is all pressure and threat. Vel is already narrowing the world down to the only thing that matters. Cassian has a slightly different energy to the rest. He feels like he's trying to keep the temperature low and keep everything under control. His assurance that nobody has to die is one of the last traces of restraint before the heist becomes something bloodier and less controllable. Unfortunately, that is completely at the mercy of what happens next. Pettigar pulling his blaster is something of a surprise. He is still part of the Empire, still a bastard in the larger political sense, but in that instant he behaves with something close to courage. He risks his life to protect the boy, not even his boy. But Vel enters the scene from above and puts an end to Pettigar's role in redeveloping this holy land. That is one of the things Andor keeps doing. It lets human behaviour stay recognisable even when the political lines are clear. Fascists can still act bravely in the moment. From there, the heist turns into work. Hard, ugly, physical work. Heist stories often invite you to enjoy the competence of the thing, the planning, the timing, the specialists, the improvisation when it goes wrong. Aldhani gives you that too, but it makes you feel the labour, the noise and the panic just as strongly. The payroll is heavy. The credits are locked in trays, the trolley falls and becomes irretrievable. The men loading the credits are scared, slow, exhausted. The shouting never stops. Move, faster, lift, push, pull, load it, step it up. What they are stealing is a mountain of stored value, concentrated Imperial extraction made physical. It takes bodies, sweat, time and brute force to move it. When Skeen, even up against the clock, takes a moment to just drink in the sight of the credits, it's as much about the scale as the value. And while all of this is happening inside, the episode keeps cutting back outside to the Dani and the Eye. When the Dani leader throws the fur into the fire, it's not clear if this is part of the ceremony or an insult to the Empire's gift. The Empire loses control of meaning the second its back is turned. Beehaz can narrate the decline of a people, he can describe their rituals as nonsense, he can convert hides into leases and sacred land into development potential, but he cannot control what those things mean to the people still living inside them. He cannot flatten reality as completely as he thinks he can. And in the middle of all this sits one of the key ironies of the entire heist. The rebels for this short stretch of time start sounding like the people they hate. Skeen and Vel become managers of coerced labour. TARAMYN becomes pure command voice. Bodies are moved under threat. Workers are given no choice. Fear becomes fuel. Revolution here is a group of desperate people using force, timing and fear to tear something valuable out of an Imperial structure before that structure fully wakes up. The goal is just. The methods are ugly. TARAMYN is right at the centre of that. His whole value is that he understands how Imperial obedience sounds. When he screams Commandant Inspection, muster up, it's such a brilliant move because it is a tone more than a sentence. He knows the reflex. He knows what kind of bark makes bored men stop playing cards and line up in the perfect position to be searched and subjugated. An almost Pavlovian reflex. The rebellion needs what the Empire made in him. It needs his drilled instincts, his room control, his sense of pace, his military muscle memory. Then the scene dispatches him doing the thing he is best at, moving under fire, trying to support Vel, using the body the Empire trained right up until the moment that body is taken away. If I was there, I would have shouted, "TARAMYN, duck!" What? Come on, that's brilliant. For what it's worth, I believe he gets hit as a direct result of Skeen's self-preservation instincts, not providing the requested cover as effectively as he could.
While TARAMYN'S end is heroic, it's framed as realistically mundane in the moment. He's not afforded a hero shot, he doesn't achieve anything with the sacrifice, and the camera cuts away quickly. We don't see his face again, so my only half-serious plan to analyse the faces of the fallen as I did with Tim isn't going to work here. Speaking of, I always want to take a moment to stop and reflect on someone we've lost. TARAMYN feels like someone for whom there was originally more story which got cut out of necessity. He's been one of the hardest characters to get to know. But I came to appreciate the relentless bad mood of the galaxy's grumpiest Londoner, his dedication to the cause and his skill set, regardless of its origins. The actor's name is pretty awesome. He's called Gershwin Eustache Jr. He hasn't been in anything else I've heard of and somehow doesn't even sadly have a Wikipedia page to learn more about him. Goodbye, TARAMYN. On the subject of goodbyes, we also lose Gorn here. He has spent the whole episode acting the part of a serving officer while already living somewhere else in his head. Here he finally cashes out every compromise he has made. Beehaz stiffens when he hears Gorn's voice behind him. He looks shocked but not surprised. I like that Gorn isn't even thinking about him. Now Gorn's the one flattening people into numbers, and his commandant is just another body to move credits until Beehaz addresses him directly and just says, "You." I love the shot where he hears Gorn entering. Beehaz is a mess, hair everywhere, sweating. The look on his face when he hears Gorn complaining about how behind the team are is the moment the robbery stops being a blur of orders and carts and guns and becomes something much worse. A betrayal by a man he knew, a vengeful husband he probably should have seen coming, and a subordinate now standing there barking at him to work faster. Up until that moment he assumed Gorn was already taken out of the picture by the rebels, but this makes so much sense now. And Gorn's answer to a threat of hanging is one of the best lines in the episode. 7 years serving you, I deserve worse than that. He refuses easy redemption. He is not pretending that one right choice at the end cleans away his many years inside the machine. He knows what he has been part of. He knows betrayal does not erase complicity. When the device Vel and Cinta planted start scrambling the comms in the valley, the other Imperials just assume that the Eye is the cause. We know how lax the Empire is. We can be confident that in the vast majority of instances, this suspicion would end there with a shrug. But not for Kimzi, who's noticed that the Alkenzi channel still works and knows enough about the technicalities to sense something isn't adding up. Some careful safe-cracking style knob-twiddling later, he picks up on the signal of that parallel reality underneath, overhearing Cinta and Nemik freely discussing the vault with the confidence of rebels who don't believe anyone inside the Empire is as good at their job as Kimzi is. Why is the Alkenzi channel still working? My assumption is if that signal went down when it has never done so during the Eye before, forces would be immediately scrambled to the dam, and since they're only a few minutes away by air, it's best not to arouse those suspicions this early in the process. This is why Nemik points out the switch and says don't touch it. I think there's an unspoken yet because it does seem to be part of the plan that she touches it later. When Kimzi and a squad of guards he's collected enter the scene, Gorn tries to throw rank at him. In most Imperial situations that would probably work, but Kimzi needs to hear it from Beehaz. To be fair, what he's stumbled into looks insane, and believing it's a secret exercise is a stretch. Unfortunately, Beehaz, who has spent the last 15 minutes under stress and the last 7 doing intense, unexpected exercise, chooses this moment to collapse, presumably with a heart attack, the most perfect ending for a character who was undoubtedly created as the personification of Cassian's line about the Empire being fat and lazy. After Beehaz drops, Kimzi shoots Gorn in the head almost immediately. It's actually even more inauspicious than TARAMYN'S death. It happens so quickly and cuts away so fast that most viewers would probably be thinking, wait, did Gorn just eat it? I talked about him a bit more in a previous episode, so I won't say too much here, but I liked Gorn a lot, and hats off to actor Suli Rimi for the portrayal here. When Gorn's body hits the floor, the whole thing tips from robbery into survival. You may have heard the phrase "no plan survives contact with the enemy," commonly attributed to 19th century Prussian Field Marshal Helmuth von Moltke the Elder. Or its modern version, "everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face," attributed to 20th century American boxer Mike Tyson. That's where we are now. Until this moment, the rebels are still forcing the world to behave more or less on their terms. After the shooting starts, the heist stops belonging to the people who planned it. Men scramble, time vanishes, TARAMYN and Gorn are lost, Vel is pinned, Cassian is wrestling a man in the Rhino. You know, I'm not sure we ever see Cassian win a physical fight in this show. He can't even beat Cyril up. The 2 corpos don't count, that wasn't a fight, he engineered one moment of chaos when he was out of options and just happened to come out on top. I just think it's interesting to have a male lead of an action show portrayed this way. He's a scrapper who fights with his whole heart, but generally finds himself overpowered and was probably a goner here if Nemik hadn't found a lucky shot. Cassian is fascinating through all this because the lie he's been telling about himself keeps looking flimsier. He came into Aldhani as the competent outsider, the man doing a job, the man whose relationship to ideology was strictly transactional. In this sequence he becomes central to everybody's survival. No longer is he hovering at the edge of the cause pretending he's just passing through it. The heist has pulled him bodily into usefulness, responsibility and risk on behalf of other people, and he seems good at it. Vel goes through her own transformation too. Earlier in the episode she wavered on the damn edge. Here she becomes narrow and effective. You can feel the leadership cost hardening inside her. Threaten the hand, threaten the family, keep Beehaz moving, keep the workers moving, keep the timeline visible even as it slips. She is collapsing the world into a single track because choice itself has become a form of danger. Leadership here means becoming smaller, colder, less flexible and more brutal. Cinta's role here is away from the noise, guarding a room full of bound hostages. She has at least 6 guys in there that they picked up en route, plus the Beehaz family of course. Then it turns out that blowing the locks in the vault has set off an alarm at Kimzi and they're calling. I was sure this was another hole in Gorn's plan at first, but I don't think so now. They knew those ties were coming. We have to assume for some reason that simply having Cinta say false alarm Kimzi, everything fine here, and giving a North code provided by Gorn wouldn't work for some reason. Nemik even warned Cinta the call was coming soon during their discussion, so none of this is a surprise. If the rebels had shut that channel down, Kimzi would have scrambled straight away, but if they leave it open, they'd scramble when the vault is blown, giving the rebels precious extra time. In fact, I believe this is what determines their tight deadline, because the only other concrete environmental option is setting the deadline to the end of the eye, which doesn't make sense as you'd want to be up and away while it's still at its peak. In response to the call, Cinta turns off the channel and then switches off all power to the base. Switching off the power is partly to aid in the escape from the base, especially her escape, but the timing of it happening when the call comes is a direct communication to Gorn, which we see him receive. Cinta has no direct line to Gorn, but when all the power goes off, he now knows they have 9 minutes, which explains why he turns up in the vault freaking out about the deadline. Across the valley we see one of the most beautiful shots I think we've ever seen in Star Wars, a tie hanging in its cradle, silhouetted against the eye as a tiny figure climbs down the ladder and jumps fluidly into the cockpit. A change of shot shows us 3 ties launching and howling like a storm towards the dam. We leave Cinta in that room full of living, breathing, terrified leverage. Do not worry, dear viewer, we shall return to her in the next episode to discuss what happens in there and why, and it's not what most people seem to think. And finally there is Nemik. The idealist earns his place in the action. He understands the systems, runs the radio, handles the technical side, stays brave, stays bright and switched on. The earlier anxiety is burned into adrenaline. Upon meeting him, you'd assume he doesn't have the steel for the hard stuff, but he lived the life for months and absolutely belongs in the heist. And then the heist shows him its weight. One of the youngest believers, the one most alive to the future, the one carrying the shape of a manifesto in his head, gets physically crushed by the material success of the mission. The payroll cart slams into him as the ship launches. The symbolism there is almost cruelly exact. The purest revolutionary is broken by the weight of the thing they came to steal. Money is not abstract in Andor. Empire is not abstract. It weighs something. It breaks bones. And as we see with Luthen in the last scene of this episode, even victory has mass. Everybody comes into the heist carrying a set of ideas about what matters. The Empire believes in systems, hierarchy, habit, procedure, the comfort of being obeyed. The rebels believe in timing, planning, nerve, discipline, the possibility of a blow strong enough to matter. The Dani carry ritual, memory, the eye, the older meaning of the land. And then the operation begins and all of those things are dragged through bodies, through doors, through trolleys, rooms, gunfire and panic, through one man paying attention when he should have stayed passive, through another man's heart failing, through an escape that works and still maims the people inside it. That is why this scene is much richer than a normal action climax. It gives you the excitement, certainly, the breach, the bluff, the loading, the close calls, the launch, but underneath that it is asking a harder question: what does rebellion actually feel like once it stops being an idea and becomes physical reality? The answer Aldhani gives is loud, heavy, frightened, ugly, improvised, exhausting, and morally rough. People do brave things, people do cruel things, people do practical things, people do stupid things. People let you down. Plans hold for a while, and then reality starts making its own decisions. By the time the Rono punches out into that impossibly beautiful night sky, the episode has shown that the fat, lazy Empire's old certainties are history. A parallel reality came to life in their space, changing the course of their future history in the process. The scene proves the ritual still lives, the plan can work, the Empire can be hit, the galaxy will know that now, and all of it is uglier, heavier, and more costly than anyone wanted to admit. The heist strips away any fantasy that a successful blow against power will look neat from the inside. The rebels win here because they survive the chaos slightly better than the system they have just wounded. That is the right kind of victory for Andor, hard won, half broken, airborne by inches, and already being crushed by the weight of its own success. With Cassian at the helm, the Rono freighter punches through one of the most beautiful things anyone in the galaxy has ever seen, and for about half a second, it looks like the final four might have made it out okay. They have the payroll, they have a ship. If this was a more sentimental story, this would be the rush, the release, the part where the music swells and everyone gets to feel that they pulled it off. Then Nemik says he can't feel his legs. A moment ago, the heist was still moving with the heavy rhythm of action. Doors, orders, carts, blaster fire and pursuit. Now all of that gets forced through one simple human fact. The most innocent person in the group has been crushed by the weight of the thing they came to steal. The credits are no longer a prize or a symbol or a blow against Empire. They are just mass, hard, indifferent mass. Empire is never abstract for long. It weighs something, it bruises, it snaps bones. Even success comes at you physically. And straight away the group gets pushed into the ugliest kind of decision making, the kind where care and utility collapse into the same thing. Skeen is in full panic, Vel is shouting Nemik's name and trying to stabilize him, Cassian is up in the cockpit barking that he needs a flight path right now. The med spike goes in. Nobody has the luxury of choosing between looking after Nemik and using Nemik. They have become the same thing. Nemik has been reduced to a tool here, an asset. He would agree to it, of course, though he never does consent. A med spike is a powerful stimulant that will force him out of shock and into the moment, but when it comes to his longer-term survival, it can't be the wise thing to do. But of course, none of them are getting out of this without him. Earlier in the episode, Nemik was the believer with the old star path and the essays in his head. He was the one still trying to understand how faith and action fit together. Here all of that gets compressed into function. A broken body, a supercharged brain, a voice still able to read the route and even scream it when Cassian doubts him. His ideals have not gone anywhere, they have just been forced through the narrowest, harshest possible opening. Skeen's reaction says a lot too. His panic feels real. There is too much rawness in his reaction for it to play like a calculation. Or is there? Suffice to say I have some further thoughts on this, but they will be more relevant to the next scene. Alarmed, Cassian asks what Vel has given him. He's a pilot staring at a sky that looks like the end of the world, hearing a badly injured man who has just been spiked with something start screaming at him to climb, and thinking, have you just turned the only navigator we have into someone too high to judge this? Cassian has to trust Nemik at exactly the point where Nemik seems least safe to trust, right at the moment that Cassian's own eyes are telling him that climbing is madness. By the way, this is not the only time someone tells Cassian he has to climb at the climax of a heist.
Climb! 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 Climb!
Again, it's like poetry, it's sort of they rhyme.
And then of course Nemik is right, the med spike may have shoved him back into consciousness in an ugly emergency way, but what comes out of him is still knowledge. Climb, dive, Vector 65551. I found that a little confusing because I don't know what the vector means, but I guess it means go up again because the last thing I understood was dive, which wouldn't get them out. So I assume that the dive was more of a quick tactical reposition before heading back up and punching through. I have said that episode 4 was about adaptation to new ecosystems and how the rebels can only survive by hiding in and moving through these systems, a theme that's come up again throughout the Aldhani arc. Now the Eye is the final and most violent ecosystem of all, a celestial one instead of a political or geographic one.
Again, the rebels hijack and move through a system, but there's no particularly fancy flying from Cassian here. They just survive it by understanding it a bit better than the people chasing them. That's why Nemik's old star path is such a beautiful payoff. All that earlier business with obsolete kit, vintage hardware, analog fascination, tools that still work when the shiny stuff fails, it all cashes out here. The Empire comes after them in sleek TIE fighters, fast, aggressive, standardized, and confident. They look built for this kind of pursuit right up until the ecosystem turns on them. It looks like the Eye plays havoc with their targeting and navigation systems, and then the crystals tear them apart like paper. The Rono takes plenty of hits, is slow, battered and clumsy by comparison, but it's built like a brick outhouse and guided by old analog knowledge. Earlier in the episode, the Empire had already tried to reduce the Eye, schedule it, manage access to it, fold it into an Imperial evening out. Up here in the Escape, that attitude gets shredded. The sky does what it does. Anyone who wants to survive inside it has to learn rather than command. And while all of that is happening above, the scene cuts back down to the ground. Cinta, in Imperial uniform now, is outside the base, heading down to where the Dani are watching the display. The Imperial soldiers are too. For a few moments, everybody is united as one under the same sky, occupier and occupied, rebel and Imperial. What happened in that room with the hostages is one of Andor's deliberate blanks, like the backstory on that crashed Canary ship. I've seen a lot of commentary that suggests that the idea that Cinta would permanently deal with the hostages is insane. Some people claim we see the hostages alive after Cinta is out, which categorically isn't true, we don't. Some people say things like she just wouldn't do that. Based on what? You cannot imbue those ethical standards on her. This is a woman we know nothing about. And what we do know is 1, she has been radicalized by what happened to her family, and while we're on it, why did the writers tell us that in this episode? And 2, she is, according to Skeen, stone cold. So no, I do not think the concept is insane. I can potentially buy her doing it even without a practical reason, and I can think of some practical reasons, beyond the usual facial recognition one, which actually doesn't stack up too well. Maybe she did nothing beyond holding her nerve and walking out. Maybe something much darker. I'm not going to litigate that here because I think the ambiguity is likely the point, as it does not provide a definitive answer as to whether they lived or not, which must be on purpose. There's no way Gilroy left a stone-cold, radicalized, armed woman in a room full of hostages who know one of the rebels didn't leave with the others and didn't expect this speculation. I may pull this out into a separate video because there is a compelling argument on each side. Whatever she did or didn't do that night, Cinta is left behind, alone, on purpose. Now most likely she'll change again into her stashed robes and merge in with the Dani and then split off at some point on the walk home. She speaks it after all. Or maybe she just strikes off into the hills alone, but either way she clearly has some other route off-world, maybe even whatever ship the rebels originally arrived in, hidden in the valley somewhere. Cassian, meanwhile, is going through one more stage of the change Aldhani has been forcing on him. He came into all this as the competent outsider, the man doing a job, the man who could still tell himself he was only passing through other people's causes. By the time the Rono is tearing through the Eye, he is locked into dependence on Nemik, responsibility for Vel and Skeen, a fight for everyone's survival. He has long since gone beyond 250,000 credits worth of detached professionalism. He has just not admitted it yet.
I'm here to win and walk away.
The scene turns the heist's victory into something painful enough to feel real. They do get out, they do beat the ties, the payroll does leave Aldhani, but nobody on the ship gets the clean emotional high unless a story would hand them. That is the right kind of escape for Andor, fast, desperate, dazzling, and wounded. It gives the rebels the win but refuses to let them enjoy it. The cost is extreme, it weighs upon them all. By the end of the scene, the Empire is left with its trousers firmly around its ankles, but nobody gets to leave untouched. Nemik's body is wrecked. Vel used that body like she was jump-starting a dead battery knowing the alternator was already gone. Cassian is pulled another step deeper into the cause, and Cinta is left in an unanswered moral space that invites some dark questions. All the while, the Eye blazes over all of it with impossible beauty, and that contrast is the point. Rebellion can win, it just never wins clean.
Wouldn't that be lovely?
Skeen finally sees his chance the moment that Nemik gets crushed. The Rono is in space, the heist is behind them, Nemik is fading. and once the engines have settled into that steadier hum, the Aldhani team stops being a team, and Skeen's whole internal wiring comes alive. The necessity that held everyone together for those last few days down to those last frantic few minutes is gone. There is room to breathe, and the second that room appears, motive comes flooding back in. Cassian wants a heading, Vel wants to know whether Nemik is still alive, and Skeen suggests it's because it's easier for her if he isn't. Within seconds, the atmosphere is changed from shared action to shared suspicion. I don't think Skeen came into Aldhani with some hidden master plan to rob the rebels. But he does have an always-on betrayal mindset. Here, finally, opportunity catches up with his worldview. I could put up an argument that apart from Cassian, 4 people here can fly, if not anywhere near as well as he can. They had options, that's why Cassian had to argue for the role. Gorn and TARAMYN would probably have the fundamentals from their training for basic troop shuttles not dissimilar to the little freighter. Nemik has ingested the manual and seems to be the type who can transpose that knowledge to the real world, and Vel is an adventurous young person who can afford her own ship and lessons, so she would have learned just like an adventurous young person can learn to fly in our world, when they have the resource. Skeen needs a pilot, but he knows none of those 4 would join him and betray the mission, and he's not going to be able to get one over on this tight-knit team by himself. So all those months on Aldhani, he's not even bothering to indulge the betrayer inside him because practically there's no conceivable route out with the money. Now, Skeen has somebody he can picture doing it, a mercenary, a man who keeps saying he is here for the money, a man who looks from the outside a lot like Skeen does. Skeen's been investigating him for 3 episodes. As well as evaluating a potential security threat, I believe he's been assessing his likelihood of saying yes should this moment ever come up. I have pushed this idea of a genuinely protective Big Brother connection with Skeen and Nemik, which could easily be read as grooming him for an eventual pitch about turning on the rest, but I have no doubt now it's real, and sadly that comes with a heartbreaking caveat. As I said, Skeen hasn't been planning betrayal. If he were, he would have been buddying up with the others in the chameleonic way of his, and we've not seen him be anything but professional with the rest. Skeen is smart. He knows the kid isn't turning on the rebellion, even at gunpoint. He's probably the hardest to turn, if anything. So why waste time befriending him unless the connection is real? Also, Skeen's immediate pain at Nemik being hurt is obviously real. But, and here comes the heartbreak, by the time he's arguing with Vel about going to the doctors, I'm sure he's thinking primarily of the money. The agreed plan will be to drop it off somewhere, to someone. Vel can't just be taking it to Coruscant. Lord knows who Luthen trusts enough to send for the pickup. I doubt he or Claire would go themselves, unless they were planning on somehow dumping everyone except Vel out of an airlock. But now Nemik's crushed spine presents Skeen his opportunity. The underground doctor they had in the contingency. Divert the cash away from where it's meant to get to and wait for the moment to pitch this Clem guy. The fact that the doctor might save Nemik, which he isn't really planning on finding out about either way, is a bonus. Skeen does want that outcome, so yeah, he likes him, but if his best play had involved avoiding the doctors, ensuring Nemik didn't have a chance, I guarantee he'd have been arguing that side while outlining how genuinely sad he finds the necessity of it. But at the end of the day, he'd shoot Nemik if he was between him and the money. It sort of reminds me of the Penguin show. Oswald really does care about Victor, but... watch it if you haven't, it's great. Once they commit to that detour, the heist stops being a shared operation and everybody starts showing what they actually are. Vel genuinely is conflicted here. They won, they didn't get as much as they wanted and lost 2 men going on 3, but they won. But not really, not until they get home alive with the money dropped wherever it's going. A detour for someone who sure looks like they can't be saved is a big risk. If Skeen thinks Cassian processes the world like he does, he probably sees Cassian swinging the vote his way as proof that the other's seen the same opening he has. But I don't think it's crossed Cassian's mind yet, he's just thinking of Nemik. The man who keeps insisting he is only here for a fee is now helping drag an injured revolutionary to an underground doctor before the money is even dealt with. Once Vel is inside dealing with the doctor, Skeen makes his move. He begins with luck, which feels right for him. Luck drives the whole damned galaxy. It made me think of the YouTube algorithm. That's the philosophy of someone who has lived too long in scarcity to believe in fairness. Then he gets to the number, 80 million, 40 million apiece, a dead moon with no one home, enough to disappear. When Cassian brings up the brother with the orchard, Skeen says, "I don't have a brother." It sounds like a confession, but it isn't quite one. If the brother died, the sentence is still true. Skeen doesn't have a brother. What Skeen gives Cassian is not clarity but destabilization. He makes the whole story wobble at the exact moment he's trying to make Cassian wobble too. He's not saying he lied about everything, he's saying, you don't get to know what part of me is real. The real weapon in Skeen's pitch is his theory of Cassian. He is trying to tell Cassian who he is. He is saying, you and I are the same animal. We came up from the same dirt. We know how the world works. We know the cause is for other people. Men like us take the opening when it comes, and damn who gets hurt in the process. Cassian's reaction is final and fast. Part of it is obvious self-preservation. Once Skeen says it aloud and Cassian does not go along with him, the equation changes instantly. Skeen now knows Cassian is a threat to him. Cassian knows Skeen knows that. You can't put that cat back in the bag and carry on like normal. But I don't think that alone explains the speed of the draw. There's something more personal and involuntary in it. Skeen has named the filthiest part of Cassian with total confidence. He has taken the life Cassian has been living and turned it into a creed. You can almost hear Cassian's body reject it before his mind catches up. There is survival in the shot, but there is also disgust, an allergic reaction to the wrongness of what Skeen defines him as. I once said that he lashed out at his own reflection in an allergic reaction to the concept of being part of the machinery of authority. I called the reaction, that will not be me. That's the same thing here. Finally, most cutting of all, I think Skeen was reaching him. No need to hurt Vel or Nemik, just get in and fly away. I'd have done it. He doesn't know these guys, he doesn't owe them anything. I think Cassian's realised if he allows Skeen to keep talking, he's going to go for it, so he shuts him up. Skeen was one of the more interestingly performed characters on the show, and the guy behind him is Ebon Moss-Baccarat, who's primarily known for The Bear. I haven't seen it. Outside of Andor, I've only seen him as Ben Grimm in the new Fantastic Four movie, in which he was also excellent. And while we're on the topic, let's wave off Alex Lawther. He's got a great career ahead, only 30 still. He's from up the road in Winchester and has been in a bunch of stuff, but it looks like the only one I've seen was Alien Earth, and unlike most people, I thought that TV show was a bit rubbish. Back to the scene which walks us inside. The Doctor has failed. Vel thanks him for trying. Then Cassian enters armed and the Doctor throws up all four hands. Vel's response to Cassian is fury, suspicion, refusal. She refuses to believe what Skeen was planning. Has she met him? He's like the sketchiest guy in the galaxy. His name is a cross between Scheme and Skeeve, for Christ's sakes. Of course he was going to take the money. But it's easier for her to process putting the dirt on the outsider rather than on the man she recruited. Better to be wrong about the mercenary than wrong about the whole mission. And Cassian, for his part, tries to retreat into the oldest explanation he has for himself. He wants his cut, the exact amount promised. He is leaving the freighter and the rest of the money. He did the job. He's done. Cassian has taken the credits he's owed and returned the crystal. He's trying to reduce Aldhani back to a contract after Aldhani has already changed him. You can hear him forcing the old logic over the top of the new reality. He even offers the Doctor 30,000 credits for the ship in the barn, twice its value. In a room full of mortality, suspicion and failed ideals, he is still trying to leave through a transaction. He wants this to be something that can be balanced, squared, paid for, walked away from. He wants it clean. And he almost succeeds. Then Nemik reaches out from beyond the grave and destroys that attempt, requesting Clem be given his digital notepad of his writings and voice recordings, including the manifesto. Cassian gives one treasure back and takes the other away. He says he doesn't want it, but of course, he takes it. In a way, that's his story. Cassian's words always arrive a little later than his life. That is the point where Aldhani stops being a score and becomes an inheritance. Skeen tries to turn the whole thing into a robbery after the fact, 40 million each and the rest can rot. Cassian rejects that path in the most final way possible. Vel tries to hold on to some remnant of the group's dignity while surrounded by evidence that she never really knew what some of them were. Nemik doesn't make it, but his words survive the mission. And Cassian, who still wants to call himself a hired man and walk away, and only really yearns to be left alone, becomes the person those words are handed to. The crew is finished, the operation is finished. What remains is a rebel manifesto in the hands of the one person still trying hardest to believe that none of this has got anything to do with him. The job is over. And after 43 minutes of exciting heisting, the show tells us, in a minute and a half or so, that the heist is not even the big story of the episode. The reverberations are. Each micro scene here, the ISB, Mon at the Senate, and Luthen hearing the detail in the gallery, shows a different reaction to the same shockwave. The thematic umbrella is that insurgency, even when justified, even when heroic, does not move history in a straight line. It moves it in all directions at once, and many of those directions are catastrophic. First stop the ISB, the Empire reacts with characteristic force, an alert goes out, staff practically run through the corridors, and Partagaz informs his team they shouldn't expect to be going home for a while. Then he says it, right out in the open, unhidden by the ISB's usual smoothing of language. He says retaliation plans, not investigation plans, not containment plans. The Empire's first instinct is not to understand what happened, how or why, it is to punish everything within reach. The rebellion has handed the ISB a moral blank check. If the heist is meant to destabilize, the ISB scene proves the Empire is far from broken here. It's empowered. The staff running through the organic, intestinal, rounded corridors look like a bloodstream, or more specifically antibodies. Really reminds me of that old cartoon Once Upon a Time Life. I learned so much watching that show. The ISB is a body reflected in all the medical language Partagaz tends to use. The scene is staging the Empire as a biological system, and the rebels are a pathogen that has just made it stronger. Then we're in the Senate. Mon Mothma is mid-speech. She's talking about Gorman, some planet being oppressed by the Empire, probably just a bit of narrative colour, not likely to come up again. She's measured, careful, building a case for a fact-finding commission, the kind of painstaking work that reform requires. I completely misread this scene at first. I thought the other senators were leaving because they don't care enough, because they think Mon is doing something risky and don't want to be seen to be involved or supportive. But no, everybody is a long way away, but looking more closely, this is basically the moment the news hits the galaxy, and what we're looking at is the equivalent of everyone's phone going off, after which they all start freaking out and leaving as fast as they can. They know bad things are coming, and they have things to do, strongly worded condemnations to write, documents to shred, funds to move around. In some cases, they might want to disappear. This is the moment I realised this is a really huge deal. I don't know my wider lore enough to know for sure, but it feels like the Empire has never been hit this hard before, or at least never been shamed like this before. And so whoever these Gormans are, they have missed their chance at political support because of Luthen's actions, and will continue to endure that boot on the throat. He would probably listen to Mon's speech and hear the ineffective language of a system that only pretends to listen, but the immediate effect of Aldhani is still to make life worse for the oppressed people he claims to be fighting for. Then the gallery. Clea is with a customer and Luthen interjects with some patter about how a forgotten language is freeing rather than sad. You decide what it means. I thought this was a little nod to the rebellion generally, not the covert nature of the work so much, more the way it succeeds largely by repurposing things that belong to the Empire. A uniform, a process, a freighter, a battle radio, a whacking great pile of credits. There's a guy using the gallery like a cafe for some reason. I guess he's waiting for the rich lady. Maybe it's her son taking mum out shopping, or her driver. He's reading the news and mentions Aldhani casually like gossip. Luthen's startled and for 1 second might think the ISB have got him, but the guy's just a guy, and it turns out Luthen's little operation is the talk of the town. He uses the non-serious request for an Aldhani relic to disappear to the back and starts to laugh. And then we get an entire character arc in a single gesture. His arms raise in celebration, but they don't stop where they meant to, up in the air. Instead they sweep through, coming to rest atop his head in consternation. The best word I could come up with to describe what he's feeling is enormity. Everything he's sacrificed has led to this moment. You can see him go from yes to oh fuck. There's no going back now. He just kicked over the hornet's nest that happens to rule this galaxy, which means billions will suffer, and it means they're coming for him. 3 rooms, 3 frequencies of the same shockwave. The Empire accelerates. Hope gets cut off mid-speech, and the man who lit the fuse can't quite bring himself to finish the celebration. He wanted the fire, but as the smoke rises, he realizes he cannot control the direction of the wind. If you're still watching, amazing, thank you. We've got 1 video left to go. Good news everyone, I'm not going to do my usual annoying channel update, and that wouldn't be good news anyway. But I will show you a few little moments from episode 7, Announcement. I believe I will be able to get that onto YouTube by late August, early September, but scene analyses from the episode are going onto Patreon now. And if you want to come check it out, I'm offering the first month at $3, £2 fiddy, until the end of June, to celebrate completing 25% of the series in my first year, so that's half price to give it a whirl for a month. Link is pinned in the comments. Here's the trailer. So he repeats the defense, it's a brown suit, and then he clears his throat. The repeated throat clearing is a lovely little betrayal. I've called this out once or twice before, but I've only recently noticed he's always clearing his throat. Not loudly, not like Bob Fleming from the Fast Show.
Fishing tackle. Excuse me. No.
Nobody ever gets my references. With Cyril, it's subtle, quiet, hesitant, and under his breath. Cyril is full of things he cannot safely say. Anger, shame, resentment, panic, and pride. All of it gets forced down into the throat, managed, swallowed, reset. His body keeps leaking the feelings his language tries to suppress.
It's a brown suit.
Oh, thank you, Clyde. Thank you.
Yularin says the criminals responsible for Aldhani think they have surprised the Empire, but the Empire knows better. The real shock, he says, will come when the rebels discover how ready and eager the Empire is to respond. The word eager gives the game away. He is trying to sound calm and prepared, but the appetite leaks through. This is not a state reluctantly enforcing the law after an attack. This is a state delighted to finally have the excuse it wanted. Emergency politics, emergency powers, the Reichstag fire and the Enabling Act, 9/11 and the Patriot Act, the internment of Japanese Americans after Pearl Harbor. These things rarely end well. Heck, Palpatine is only in power because he took a bunch of emergency powers and never gave them back. Aldhani has done exactly what he wanted. The stolen credits are the practical win, the fuel the rebellion desperately needs. But the deeper victory is uglier than money. The Empire has begun to show its hand. Soldiers are being interrogated, the garrison is being purged, and 134 Aldhani residents have already been taken into custody. That last detail hangs over the whole scene. The heist worked, and the first people we hear paying for it are the Darnies we saw watching the Eye. They will be processed, interrogated, shipped off for hard labour, and made examples of. If they're lucky, some of them might live long enough to see the Empire fall 9 years from now. And Luthen's reaction to this news is to smile. The manager, like so many functionaries of the Empire, does not seem like a villain. He is friendly, fluent, mildly pleased with himself, and fully adapted to this world. He has magnificently awful patter about the value and respectability of the job. He sounds like a man trying to sell the hidden glamour of a photocopier contract. By the way, his name is Flob. Not Krennic, not Yularin, not some blade-sharp imperial name with menace in it. Flob is British slang for spit. It sounds like bureaucracy left in a damp drawer for too long. Maybe it's short for Flobbert. On the surface, the Andor episode The Eye is about the celestial event the Ark has been built around, but when you look across the whole episode, the concept of the Eye starts to feel like the organising principle for everything in it. Spectacle, judgment, seeing, being seen, not being seen, deciding what deserves attention and what gets pushed out of frame, choosing what to look at, failing to look at what's right in front of you. While everyone is looking up at the sky, the Aldhani heist itself becomes the real spectacle, a story that represents a paradigm shift in the galactic politics of authority. In the first scene, Cassian tells Nemik the Empire does not care enough to learn. The problem with Empire here is bigger than cruelty. Cruelty at least implies attention. What Cassian describes is a system so dominant it does not even need to understand the people under it. They are unseen, beneath notice. But Aldhani is the moment a group of people who mean nothing to the Empire force it to look. By the end, the heist itself gives the Empire a black eye, and the entire galaxy is looking upon the same moment in unison. One thing the episode explores is the difference between looking and seeing. The Empire is looking all the time. It watches the Darni pilgrimage, it manages access to the Eye, it escorts people up the road. Beehaz explains the Darnis as though he understands them completely. He knows their habits, their pride, their supposed simplicity, the ways to reduce them and redirect them, but all through those scenes you can feel the gap between imperial sight and actual vision. He knows nothing about them. He can describe the people he is occupying and still fail to see the world they inhabit. He has no idea he's inches away from fake troops, or of the hatred dripping from the words of either the Dani leader or even Gorn. He sees nothing. To the Danis, the eye is sacred, older and larger than the Empire. To the rebels, it becomes an opening, a dangerous environment to move through, a piece of cosmic weather that can cover sound, motion, confusion, and escape. But the Empire thinks it is hosting the spectacle. It has scheduled the eye, packaged it, built an evening around it. Beehaz wants to use the opportunity to be seen as a successful oppressor of the Danis, and even his own wife and son are being dressed and arranged as part of the display. 3 ways of looking at the same phenomenon, each exposing a different relationship to power. The rebels are in disguise for much of the episode. A unit of supposed Alkenzi troops walks past Imperial eyes and is accepted as real enough. 2 soldiers sense something off and do nothing. Vel and Cinta hide in the dark while soldiers stand yards away and never quite see them. Kimzi misses Vel atop the dam, though ultimately he is the only one on duty that night with his eyes truly open. And then there is the eye itself, the final ecosystem of the Aldhani arc. It simply behaves according to its own rules, and anyone who wants to live through it has to understand those rules better than the person chasing them. That's why Nemik's old star path pays off so beautifully. The Empire comes screaming after the Rono in sleek, fast, lethal ties which look unbeatable for about 10 seconds. Then the environment starts treating them like debris. Nemik, half broken in the cockpit, can see the route through. Cassian still has the hands to thread the eye of the needle. The Empire has superior hardware, but as their targeting computers conk out the poorer vision, they are looking, but they're not seeing. Another question which Luthen wrestles with at the end is, what does it cost to become visible? The rebellion wins Aldhani by staying hidden for most of the hour. Then the operation succeeds and the terms change immediately. Hidden movement becomes headline. The thing that survived this long by avoiding the eye now forces it open. In the ISB, the corridors are suddenly full of running bodies and emergency tempo. The boardroom is packed. Partagaz does not talk about understanding or context, he talks about retaliation. The beast is awake. The fat, lazy empire Cassian spoke of is gone, and the Eye of Sauron, or I guess Sheev, is now scouring the galaxy for the rebels, and not just our ones. They're on the lookout for the most minor acts of rebellion now. Mon is trying to make the Senate take a close look at Gorman. She's demanding scrutiny, but Aldhani arrives and steals the room's attention. Her words are still clear, still morally serious, but the chamber's gaze has already shifted. Mon is suddenly competing with a spectacle big enough to pull every eye away from the people she is trying to protect. I mentioned judgment, often symbolized by an eye. The episode is packed with it. Beehaz judges the Danis. Beehaz judges Gorn, suggesting he'll hang. Dani Bryan Cranston judges Gorn with his jibe about the eye finding good in him. Skeen judges Vel when Nemik is hurt. Vel judges Cassian when he walks into the surgery. Mon judges the Empire's actions on Gorman. Skeen misjudges Cassian's capacity for immorality, and once both men's eyes are open to the reality of the other, Cassian goes from judge to executioner in a moment. We see clearly who everyone is by the end of the episode. Petagar was willing to risk the ultimate price to protect a child. Beehaz, a petty tyrant who was too used to comfort. Taramyn and Gorn, reformed bad guys who were willing to risk it all in hitting back at the system that twisted them into what they had been. Nemik was the man who could save the day with his final breaths. Skeen, failing to back up Taramyn in the moment, saw the latter fall, and then we find out exactly what kind of man he is at the end of the episode. And ultimately the eye gives us our strongest window yet into Cassian's soul. There is no compelling reason for his actions to be so noble here, and yet they are. And it's not just in the way he refuses to run with the money and make sure he squares everything off, it's in the way he leaves with a manifesto he says he didn't even want, out of respect to a fallen comrade who'll never know if he refuses. The Empire snaps awake in this episode, but Cassian starts to stir. His change is slower than theirs, but underway nonetheless. He walks away with his money and tries to carry on as before. He wants to just go back to sleep, say, on a nice beach somewhere. But something has started here. A man can only roll over and ignore the light for so long.